Sometimes when I read a rule book, I relate the rules that I'm reading to another game that I played. I did that with Caves and Catacombs. Let me correct that in this video, so let's get into it. Welcome to Solitary RPG. In this video, I am going to be responding to comments that were left on my review of Caves and Catacombs. The reason for that is I feel there were enough positive comments that it will just add to the overall experience with this game system. I am not going to call out the commenters by name. I'm just going to go through and talk about the comments that really highlighted something to me that I feel adds to this review. First thing we're going to talk about is the combat system. Sometimes when I am learning a game, I will relate rules that I'm reading to games that I already played. This happens a lot to me when I play games that have many additions like Warhammer 40K, Blood Bowl, which is my favorite game. When you've played these games for a long period of time, rules just imprint in our heads. And then when we go to play the game, we're playing like 3rd edition and everybody else is playing 6th edition and we're playing 2 different games. And that happened to me with Caves and Catacombs. Let me get into the combat section because that is where a viewer pointed out to me that I may have been doing combat wrong. And when I read the comment, I was like, huh? And then I went back and I read the rules. And I read the comment and I was like, holy crap, I was doing combat wrong. So let's fix that in this video. So when I was playing the game on the video, I went with the idea that the enemies always strike. They always hit. That's how I presented the rule. They always land their attacks, and that's not true. And I missed the rule in the rule book. I just kind of imprinted from other games I played, like Dragonbane. The enemies always hit, period. You have to respond to their attack. But that's not how the rule's written here. It starts with the initiative. The first idea that this was in here was, as enemies only act in response to the PC's action, they do not roll for initiative. This first piece right here says they act in response to the PC's actions. It's not that the enemies always attack or always do something, they just respond to the PCs. And then if we get into the actual chart, it says here, enemies deal damage in response to failed or partially successful attacks. So it's not that the enemies always get to attack, they only respond to your failed attempts or partial attempt. This does change combat, and it does make combat a little bit more survivable, but it's still a brutal combat system. So now with that understanding, when you go to roll for combat, on a 1, 2, or 3, you had failed the combat, the enemy hits you, so you take the damage. On that 4, that is considered the counterattack. That means you hit the enemy and they hit you back. On the 5 and 6, that means you succeeded in combat and the enemy does no damage to you and they do not hit you back. So that actually changes my whole playthrough and actually makes combat a lot more survivable, because that explains why I was dying so much. So this actually helps out. So very thankful that the viewer pointed that out to me. And again, this is just years of playing games and being maybe a little distracted when reading rules, or sometimes just relating rules that you're reading to other games. It's a bad habit to be in, and this obviously happened to me. We're not perfect. I read a lot of game rules, I play a lot of games, and it just happens. So please accept this re-clarification of this rule. Hopefully this makes your combat experiences much more enjoyable in the future. The next comment had to do with ranged attacks. There's nothing in the core rule book that deals with ranged attacks. You can get a bow. It has an attack value of 3. Allows ranged attacks, cannot be used while holding a shield or a torch. Those are pretty simple rules, but there's nothing that really defines ranged attacks in this game. Now, yes, we can use common sense and go, well, obviously we have to have line of sight, and in a dungeon that would obviously mean you're in a segment that has an encounter and you can shoot your bow at them and you should be okay. But we go back to the same mechanics. On a 1, 2, or 3, you fail and they hit you back. But if we're at ranged combat, how does that work? So that raises a question. And what I was hoping, I've only really played Caves and Catacombs at the time. I had not really read into all of the other rules, so I was hoping there would be something in the Wilderness expansion that would have given us a little bit more information dealing with ranged combat, since we would be exploring the outdoors. And they do offer, the rules offer a little bit to deal with outdoor adventuring and ranged, I don't want to say attacks, but just range in general. But there's nothing specific about ranged attack. So we do have this chart on page 6 of the Wilderness Exploration supplement that you can roll for how far away an encounter is, but the modifiers are meant specifically for hiding and escaping. They are not meant for ranged combat. So there is nothing in the rule system to help you deal with ranged combat. Now, you could create a rule if you wanted to make this work for ranged combat, but we don't want to modify the rules too much, because if you tinker too much with the rules or you modify the rules too much, are you really playing the game? That was another comment from a viewer that talked about that. Yeah, you can modify the rules and tinker with the rules, but at the end of the day, are you playing the same game? And we want to be playing the same game. So this is probably where we could just use a standard oracle, and you could go, I like my oracles to stay with the dice mechanics that I'm using, so we could use a simple D6 oracle. And we could, this is a roll high system where like 6s are successes. So what we could do is ask an oracle a simple question. Imagine our party walks into a dungeon. One of the party members has a bow. There's an encounter in the dungeon, let's say a group of goblins. We want to know if they charge up on us, or can the, I'm going to say ranger, get a shot off with the bow. So we ask the oracle, and we just do a simple D6 roll. I rolled a 6. That's a yes and. So maybe what we can do with that yes and is, yes, the ranger gets the shot off, and it's such a great shot it avoids the armor and goes right to vitality damage. Simple oracle question, not changing the rules too much. You're basing it on a roll, an oracle roll, to allow you to use a ranged weapon because there are no rules for it. We are staying with the system. We're just asking an oracle. And then after that first round of combat, once the goblins engage with the party, the ranged combat is no more. And the ranger has to switch out weapons. So that's going to take an action and switch over to a sword, or use an arrow as a pointy stick and poke them in the eyes. But that's one way of going about it. And if we would have rolled the no, that would be a no but, or a no and, however you want to use your oracle. Maybe the no is, no, you don't get a shot off, and the goblin gets to attack you first because they were right there by the doorway when you went in and you didn't have time to respond. And then you can do whatever you want with 2 up. Like I would go, 1 is no but, 2 and 3 are no, 4 and 5 are yes, and 6 is yes and. and you get the extra bonus. So that is one way you could handle ranged combat. And I don't think it would be too much of a modifier to the rules for the system. And if you want, if you're doing the outdoor adventure, you could use that chart for how far away they are, and that could modify your ability. Like if they're really far away outdoors, like they're visible, but you don't know if you're going to be able to shoot them, maybe you only hit on a 6 because they're so far away. So you can do little things like that, little modifications like that, but you're not rewriting the rules system. And that's going to bring me to the next comment. There was a gentleman that responded and actually sent me an email of all the house rules that he had created for this system. And I haven't had a chance to really play through the rules. You know, I've read them, but I haven't had a chance to play through them. What he was doing with the house rules is creating rules for using miniatures. So there's a lot of engagement, like who's going where and how you're going to handle that. There's also movement rules, like pulling from the Hero Quest system, rolling your dice and moving them on a hex grid board. Going back to a little bit more of the Hero Quest vibe in the house rules, also making some other modifications to the rules, had his own version of ranged combat. Let me pull that up and read that real fast. His version of ranged attacks, attacking at range, basically uses the same rules as the melee attacks. The characters can only shoot at a target within line of sight. Any reasonable cover the target has gives the attacker a -1 to their dice rolls. That's another reasonable rule, not changing the system at all. Since most combat occurs within the closed confines of the dungeon, range is equal to 1 segment per attack value, provided there is line of sight and lighting. The house rules that he created are pretty straightforward and simple, not really changing the mechanics of the game, just trying to add some clarification to the rules because they don't exist. And that's what I like this system because of the simplicity of it and giving you some of that flexibility to interpret the rules and add some of your own flavor to it for the rules that aren't here. But that's where you get to make those decisions on how you want to approach the ranged combat because they don't exist. The next comment I want to respond to was somebody left a comment kind of regarding how simple the rules are and you're just rolling on charts, responding to the charts, and are you really playing the game or any game at that point? You're just kind of rolling on charts. And this is one of my complaints I've always had with 4 Against Darkness. If you've been watching my channel for any length of time, I haven't done any videos on 4 Against Darkness. To me, that is a very mechanical game, just like this one. I think 4 Against Darkness is one step further in the more mechanical side with less immersion. I have played a lot of 4 Against Darkness, and I literally rewrote a lot of the charts so that the game had some more immersion. But yes, you are just rolling on charts. Yes, you're just responding to your dice rolls and moving forward. There's not a lot of the immersion or agency in this game. There are the tools to provide that information, but it's really up to the player to sit down, understand that this is a system that you can use. This is like Morkborg stripped down type system. If you're familiar with Morkborg, there's not a lot in that rule book. I have just the core text of that book, and there's just not much to it. That's what this system is. This is just a stripped down mechanical process. There are things that will give you a reason to go into the dungeon. There are some wilderness exploration and encounter books give you all kinds of additional information. You still need to come to the table armed with your pencil and your paper, and you need to bring in that immersion. Now, does that mean you bring in outside tools like charts and tables? You know, how many of those books do we have in our collection? So that way, if you want to add more to the immersion, you have those to pull from. Philip Reed has tons of different cards and books that you can use to add to your immersion that just give like descriptive information. So if you need something like that, Game Master Apprentice cards, there are lots of stuff on those cards that you could use. So there are tools you can use, but it is up to you. How much effort do you want to put into this simple system to generate that immersion so that it feels a little bit more like an RPG? I can't provide that for you. That is something that you would have to decide. But as gamers, we have our preferred tools. We have the cards that we like to use. We have the charts that we like to use. So you can easily take any of these charts out and just use your own charts. So that way you're not changing the foundations of the game. You're not rewriting the game. You're just creating your own immersion for the game. So that would be up to you. But if you just want something simple, this is one of those games that like, hey, I've got like an hour, I don't have nothing going on, maybe waiting for something to happen, and you just want to roll on some tables and generate a little dungeon or go exploring the outdoors. It's a simple system. You don't have to remember how to play it. It's pretty straightforward because it's based on a simple dice mechanic of 1 to 3 is a failure, 4 is a success with a complication, and a 5 and a 6 is a total success. So you could do that. But it got me thinking, how hard would it be to write an adventure like this? How hard would it be for me to sit down and generate a dungeon that has the immersion that the commenter was making, that didn't require them to roll on the charts? It would still be the same game, but it would be the dungeon exploration that they would just maybe have to decide what rooms they're going into, but everything would be provided in like a zine to fit the theme of this. You know, like how hard would that be? So it's got my mind thinking about writing a supplement for this game. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to approach it right at this moment, but I think it could be fun. I think that would be a neat little project. Maybe it would be something I work on throughout the year of 2025. Not something that I would just be able to sit down in a month and crank out, but I make it just a thing I work on throughout the year, writing a supplement for Caves and Catacombs that adds that immersion so that somebody could pick up the core rules, have this supplement in hand, and just kind of adventure and not have to worry about rolling on all the charts. They would have all the immersion. Everything would be in this zine, if there are charts, because there will be like maybe some little charts to roll on, but those would be responding to certain things that maybe unfold in the dungeon. Like you're in a certain room and maybe there's some options and you'd roll on a chart for that, maybe like an effect or something like that. I don't know. But it's got me thinking that that might be a fun project to work on in 2025 since we're coming close to the end of the year. I like to have year-long projects, so I'm probably going to do something with that moving forward. But I like the system enough that I feel it's worth writing an adventure for because it's a good system. It's just it needs some effort from the players, and maybe that's what draws me to it, because I don't like published adventures that have all the details. I do like some published adventures. I don't want to say all. Like Keep on the Borderland is my favorite. I should do a video on that. It's my favorite adventure, and I love just playing in that world because there's just enough information to get you excited and involved in the world, but there's enough openness to the supplement that you can go explore and discover things on your own. And that maybe that's what I need to create, is some sort of a little supplement like that. You're in a world, you're in a place, and you can go exploring it. But there are some, like the Dungeon of Chaos. There are some set places in this world that you need to explore or go through, and they're kind of programmed. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. It's something I am toying around with, and I have some ideas brewing in my head about how that would all work out. that was just me responding to the comments that were left on my review of Caves and Catacombs. It was one of my most successful videos on this small channel. It only got like 1,000 views in the first week, which for me is fantastic. I celebrated that. I took that as, I was released a video at the right time and people engaged with it, and I appreciate the engagement because that's what keeps me going, is people commenting and having part of that conversation. And hey, call me out when I make a mistake. I am not that thin-skinned. I make a lot of mistakes with gaming, and part of that is I read a lot of rules, and sometimes I just get rules mixed up, and it just happens. So thank you very much for watching this little kind of update or recap of the Caves and Catacombs. Have a great day. Bye.